Hi, my name's Tiffany Patch, and I'm here with Gregg Perry of Perry's Clocks. We're here to discuss the restoration of the bell tower at the Salem Baptist Church in Salem, New Jersey. It's a beautiful historic building, and there's a wonderful bell tower that rang for the first time tonight in how many years?
About 10 years, but it's not working, but we just rang it manually, yes.
It must have been pretty exhilarating to be able to hear that bell ring.
Well, it was, but it was the matching of the bells in Paris and in Bath, England that was more my colleagues that really do have a concept of restoration and conservation, and they're pulling for us here. So that was the real excitement of the night, I'd say. Yes.
What would you say is the next step in the restoration? Are you, I know that there was a wonderful documentary done by John and Life After Television. I watched that documentary, and there's a lot of history in this one special church. I'll let you talk about it, but I thought it was really interesting how this bell has gone from one location to another, and that it has such historic value. And I love that you're so enthused and driven to restore this and get it back to working condition, and hoping our goal here tonight is that we can get people excited too about making a difference in Salem County and making a difference in Salem City. So thank you for everything that you're doing and initiating this action, because something needs to be done. And you know, I watched the video, and I hope that everybody else watches the video. I love your idea of bringing the community together on this project, and I want to talk to you more about why you think this is the kind of project that can make a difference in the community. Some people might look at this and say it's just a bell. Why do you think, how do you intend to motivate people, and how do you intend to really get some momentum behind this project?
I think, first of all, the bell itself probably still exists because it was cheaper to recast it than to get a new bell. But that's a good thing for us, because that encapsulates history in the recasting. And when they do recast, they put all the casting dates on it. So it's a treasure, and to know what this bell has been through. It stood the test of time. There's no doubt about it. But as we spoke earlier, this is a bellwether project, a beacon project, to try and kick off, to bring people together. And if we can bring, who knows? It takes one, it takes two, and some really ardent followers from different disciplines, from historical societies, preservationists, local and from afar. But if we can get a following together, then we can start tackling some of the roofs of the houses that are falling in, and start with some stabilization there.
For the people who may not be from the area, hopefully we will have a pretty broad viewer base. How would you describe the city of Salem to someone who's never been there before?
Well, the city of Salem is the first town it's one of the first successful English colonial-speaking towns. We have towns where the British came and started a town. That's simple. But these were the colonials that started this, and it lived on. But it did outgrow its boundaries, because when William Penn came here, he put John Fenwick in charge. As Salem grew from 1675, it outgrew its boundaries because it has marsh and water boundaries. They went up to Old Newcastle and tried it at Old Newcastle, and that grew exponentially also. Burlington City, and then Philadelphia. So running out of land is a common thing here. Not knowing how quickly we're going to grow in a new society. But Salem is important because as we look at places like Savannah could have been number 2,000 in a list of towns that actually were created in the 18th century, but yet it reigns supreme today. But this is one of the first, and that's why it is so important.
How would you describe Salem today to someone who has not been to Salem, and why would you say that this is such an important project in the city? There is a revitalization effort going on right now in Salem, and what are your thoughts on how that is progressing?
Well, just to know, number one, to know the importance of Salem. In 1933, Rockefeller came in and did a 3-year study, and he would have created this into the next Williamsburg, which he chose only not to because of the walkability. He was worried about pedestrians or museum goers walking on the two main streets. So he chose to go to Williamsburg and create something with just foundations. In Salem, we actually had the original fabric here, but unfortunately, there was the choice, safety of the patrons.
How would you describe Salem today versus, I mean, why, and again, the revitalization efforts in downtown Salem today? Do you think that the revitalization efforts are working? Do you see a difference? Do you think that this is the project that could spearhead a major change in this city?
Yeah, no, the revitalization projects in Salem today are totally misdirected. It has nothing to do with anything. We're putting in new sidewalks that has nothing to do. The problem is fabric. We cannot let the fabric antiquity turn to dust, and that's what they're doing in Salem. It doesn't get glossed over by new sidewalks, new gas street lamps, none of that. It doesn't work. We need to save the things that put Salem on the map in 1675, save its homes. What makes Salem important today, it's relevant because we still have a fabric base of dwellings, and they can be traced back to the 16th, 17th, and 18th century. And you see different centuries of build, and these original houses have been bastardized and overlaid with upgrades and additions, but we can take them back. So we still have enough fabric there. And possibly Salem has gone into a slumber over the years, and maybe that's a good thing. It may have been a deterioration. It's literally falling apart, but it's better than having someone come in and bulldoze all of the properties, which would have been just absolutely devastating. And in 1972, we came very close to that. There was a project underway to get rid of the first 12 houses coming in from Woodstown at the bridge at the Royal Port. Wow. And we actually, I was in the back of the car in 1972, and my mother was driving, and I asked her what those bulldozers were. She didn't hear this story before. And she said, well, it looks like the people didn't take care of their houses very well. And unbelievable. The windows were out. People were squatting in these houses. People, it was in the winter. People had cans. You could see smoke coming out of the windows just trying to stay warm. So they were going to tear the first 12 down. Bulldozers there, we're ready to go. So glory be, here comes a philanthropist from Philadelphia just driving through Salem. And he has someone in the car, a friend in the car. And he says, what's going on here? He demanded to find the mayor and a few on city council in Salem that day. And this was in early morning, and they stayed around until these people got out of their normal jobs. And he wanted a meeting. And he went ahead and donated about $1.1 million in 1972. A lot of money. A lot of money then, a lot of money now. But all that money, the majority went to Votech, to setting up a Votech program that kids could learn how to make moldings, raise panels, doors, windows, and put these houses back to the way they were originally. And that qualified Salem for matching funds. This man's donation did. Matching funds gave him herringbone sidewalks, gas lamps. Now that goes hand in hand in the preservation of the dwellings. These accoutrements, these ornaments, such as the sidewalks, we're a little bit backward today. We're putting in sidewalks when our houses are falling down. So we need to get it reversed a little bit. But we still barely have enough fabric here. What has to happen is the city has got to release these houses. These houses, some of them on Market and Broadway, have not been inhabited for over 20, 25, or 30 years. And let's face it, they've collected no taxes on these. So we're not getting any taxes, so why not say, okay, eminent domain, let's release them to the public. But there's reasons why they can't release them. But that's what we need to do, get those houses released. So we can put them in the hands of good preservationists, people that want a good historic home. And my foundation is being set up now that we can help educate these people what to do properly in their home, the type of moldings to use, the period, the style. and actually setting up a preservation program in the high school, an academic program, not just to show how those kids that can't make academics. So we want in Salem High School to send an academic program, 3 or 4 preservation courses, and also a VOTEC program, not at the VOTEC school, but a wood shop in the high school, and that's what's needed. Let's keep it in Salem for this time. Let's get the preservation movement started.
Where do you expect the funding for something like this kind of a project? It sounds like a great idea, and it's something that you would see a return in the city, and people could take pride in the changes that are happening. And you're getting kids off the street, and this could solve a lot of problems in the city of Salem. How do you implement a program like that? Do you have any experience? Have you seen studies that this does work? It sounds like a great idea, but you're definitely going to have challenges in getting people who, would be important decision makers to even listen to your ideas.
Well, in the top 26 preserved cities, towns in the country, the cities and towns have released their vacant properties to developers. Not to developers, developers/preservationists, because we don't want developers. Developers are going to cut and burn. They're going to tear down. So they're releasing them preservationists. So if they release the properties, we will place the properties in the hands of people that will maintain them, that will turn them around. There are people out there that will do this, or we can do it. It's done in various ways.
So right now, these properties are just sitting vacant. They're not owned. They're not bank owned. A lot of ghost properties are bank owned. These are not bank owned properties. These are.
Some of them are bank owned, but the majority of them are not bank owned. Yes.
And they're just sitting vacant,
Yes,
and
yes.
no one's collecting taxes, and nothing is happening with these properties at all.
At all.
And I'm not familiar enough with the politics in the city of Salem. Do you think that something needs to change at a higher level, at a county level, or do you feel that this starts and ends at the city level?
This would start and live at the city level. There's no doubt about it. But without getting too deep and going too negative here, there's issues there, and I don't know. We would have to skirt them by, and just take the preservation into our own hands. And a lot of this is going to result in volunteerism. If they release the properties and they don't expect back taxes for buying that property for $1, let us get the property in the hands of someone good within 3 to 4 years. As long as they live in it, they don't make it into a multiple-use dwelling. And that's the slumlord is the whole issue in Salem. It eroded the tax base tremendously, putting them in over a $31 million debt in the last 20 years.
Well, I think that we talked about it a little bit the other day as well. I have a real estate license, and I was surprised at any time that I have shown houses in Salem City, a mortgage company is always very astonished at how high the taxes are compared to the value of the homes. So I know that Salem City has one of the highest taxes in the entire county, and some of the lowest values. So I think that speaks volumes about what's going on there, unfortunately. Is the historic society or the historical society, are they involved in your project at all?
No, the Historical Society wants to, I've approached them on several occasions. They want to stay out of bounds. Basically, they're concerned with the objects inside their walls, which they should be. Typically, historical societies involved all up and down the East Coast. The more flourishing. There's historical societies come under a couple different realms. You have historical societies where people actually have advanced degrees, undergraduate degrees, and they operate and run the societies as a volunteer basis. You have some other historical societies that are run for people that want to make gains in their businesses. And some of these individuals are making gains. There's a lot of conflicts of interest, let's put it that way, in the Historical Society. And I've approached them, telling them in the next 20 years, maybe the next 10 years, you're going to be missing a good 20 or 30 dwellings, possibly on Market Street alone, with the roofs caving in now, if you don't act. But we're just very short-sighted here, very myopic, and that's what's happening. But we talked to the new executive vice president. I did on the July 4th at a little colloquy with him, and he's very receptive of trying to open up a dialogue internally with his members who have been quite vacant, quite vacuous for many years, just laying dormant and basking in complacency and not willing to stir things up. But again, I can't imagine 20 years from now. That's a beautiful building they're in. It'll be the only building, or one of the few buildings on Market Street. So.
That's sad to hear.
Yeah, and it's also sad to hear. I get all up and down the East Coast the last 37 years, and everybody knows Salem. There's some very nasty adjectives we're not going to say, but they compare Salem with Camden. And Camden, since the 40s and 50s, has not been a good place, but Salem is right there, and it shouldn't be right there.
No.
And at one time, Camden was just a crown jewel. I mean, it was a place much preferred than going to Philadelphia, probably in the late 40s, 50s, and early 60s. Yeah. So it's trying to change minds, change attitudes. How it can be done, possibly with the new executive vice president, if he can make some inroads, that's the way to go. He's a very avid preservationist, and I think he'll be pushing on the outside to make some changes.
Well, it sounds like you've made a good contact and connection there, and hopefully they will join you in your efforts. Now, for those of us who just live in the community, what can we do to get involved? What if we want to help you make a difference? How would we do that?
Well, we need to join our group, and it's pertinent that we talk about these things and know to the extent that we want to do them. What's interesting, though, that preservation is at a real all-time low, I would say, in the last 35 to 40 years. And what's particularly alarming is that with younger people, and I can understand people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s don't want to make too many changes, but the younger people are very disenfranchised, not just with preservation, but with antiquity in general, horological antiquity. And I think it's just a different world. Things are cyclical. I think it will come back. But unfortunately, a lot of these places we're talking about, they don't have the time to wait around for people to come back. But you, again, look like places like Charleston and Savannah. They're hotbeds. They have training centers down there for kids in preservation. Savannah has a school with 130 kids they pump out every year into the preservation school, and Charleston has one with about 56 graduates a year. And they span out, they tell other people, they transpose the word, and it's good for all of us. But nevertheless, it's not just a Salem problem, it's a Philadelphia problem. Philadelphia should be so geared into their history, and they've never had a coordinated effect going from point A to point B in the Betsy Ross House. There were places on Wood Street, Market Street, Race Street that had tons of craftsmen and artists. Over the years, we could have set something like this up. And we need to see these artists working, and I think people enjoy seeing artists and work. But yet Philadelphia the capital has never capitalized on this, which is quite sad, quite sad.
In this area, we do have some historic tours. Will this property be a part of historic tours in the future? Will people be able to see the bell, hear the bell?
Well, I think it would be a wonderful thing, possibly if we could set a television or video camera up there and watch the bell work. Possibly you'd have to go to church to see the bell working on one of the screens in the church. So we're going to accomplish a couple things in one stroke. I think that would be a great thing.
Let's start small.
Yeah,
asking people to go to church is a bit much these days.
It's a bit much. It's a bit much. But the
baby steps.
Yeah, the mechanism and bell are almost as if they're put into a closet today, because initially it had its own tower and it spoke to everyone on its own on all four sides. Mm-hmm. And now it's kind of hidden up there. But look, it's hidden, it's been secure for many years, and that's a good thing. There's enough texture left in that that it can be properly restored, and that's a good thing.
What physically has to happen for the clock to be restored? I know that in your video, you talk about how someone lubricated the entire clock, and now it has a lot of ambient dust and dirt throughout the entire clock. So what is involved exactly in restoring this clock, and what kind of time and what kind of budget are you going to need for a project of that caliber?
Well, the restoration of this clock is two-phase. What's happened to it is time and neglect. Okay, neglect from the owners, whoever they were, the city, the church, and the church could have a little bit of responsibility to this too, but mostly it was the city clock. But what's happened is where the axles, which have the gears on them, go through the mainframe, this is worn out. And what happens is you have a round peg and a round hole essentially with very tight tolerances. Now you have ovoid or egg-shaped holes. When you have the larger holes, you have more friction. More friction stops the clock. And it's like taking your fingers and saying this is one gear mixing with another. If your fingers or the teeth, they're supposed to depth halfway. Now some of the teeth are moving down and they're depthing on the tips, and some of the tips have broken off of some of the gears of the movement. And that's big work. Again, it's not a typical clockmaker. This is a real specialty field with only one or two in the country to do this. So every component, it's going to break down about 225 components, mechanical components, has to be taken down. Teeth either have to be added through a casting process or whole new gears have to be reconfigured and turned. The bushings, the areas where they grew, have to be drilled out on the frame up there, plugged up, and re-drilled to very tight tolerances. So it makes it very, very difficult. Typically, this kind of mechanism could be disassembled, carried down the ladder, hoisted down in parts, reassembled in the studio of the horologist, and worked on simultaneously as you go through the gear train. But this is a one-piece unit. This was toward the end of tower clock making, which was probably in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. So it's a one-piece unit. It was lifted when the spire came off by a crane. So it ain't coming apart. So a lot of this work has to be done on site. So therefore, it could be in excess of 250 trips up.
And I saw the ladder, and
the ladder's about 48 feet. The chicken ladder's about 48 feet.
that
So it's considerable.
pretty intimidating to me.
So and then we're working with temperatures, ambient dust flowing through. We're going to try and make a tent of plastic to try and cut down the amount of dust. Vacuum every day, go down to somewhat of a clean room inside of a tent, and then use a lot of solvents to do initial cleaning. And once initial cleaning's done, we go into a disassembly phase, and then disassembly back to the studio and remake the parts or reconfigure the parts and components. Then it's a reassembly, synchronization, lubrication, and hopefully we're off and running. So hopefully it'll take, sooner than later, but, it won't take 3 years.
So what is your estimate of time?
Well, I'm giving
Are you devoting your time to this full time? Is this?
No, this is saying, well, I got 3 hours tonight. I think
I'll
I'll drive to Salem and I'll go up into the clock tower.
Okay, so it's more of a hobby side project.
It's going to be a part-time project, absolutely, and it could take a couple hundred hours, literally. And I know the last pastor of the church, he has had some estimates on that mechanism in excess of $135,000 to restore it. I'm estimating the cost of materials, supplies, and anything ancillary is going to come in at about $20,000.
Wow.
Yeah,
so you're saving them a lot of money.
Yeah, but they're going to come up with the $20,000 or so through donations, and the church will try to do this if we can.
Do you know a website that people could donate to if they were interested? Is there a website? Is there a Facebook page? Social media is so key these days.
The church is setting that up. I'm not sure. We have some church members here tonight. I'm not sure the church is totally keyed into this technology, so I may be wrong, but I don't think so. So unfortunately, right now, I think it's talking to the Reverend. I think we can do better on this, and we're going to have to do better. And again, there's only so much time if I'm on the mechanical end, but if we get to a point we need parts and supplies, then that's going to have to be set up instead of us wasting time. And again, you're playing the weather. You're playing the winter weather, the summer weather, so that temperate zone of April, May, October, September, November, and otherwise it's kind of off limits. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a Facebook page for the project itself? Do you have a Facebook page? Is there somewhere that someone can follow the progress?
The progress will be Let Freedom Ring.
Okay.
From John Hohen. He's got it set up. And we wanted to keep this separate from the church for receiving funds because this is the church's project because, again, the city has walked away from it. And in 2010, they officially walked away. And that's how I found out about the project. Yeah.
That was one of my questions. How did you find out about the project? How did you become involved in the project?
I was doing the fellowship at the National Watch and Clock Museum in around 2010, and I was having a very good lunch. It was a very temperate day, 72 degrees, sitting looking at the Susquehanna River, pondering how I could just give my free time away. And the phone rings, and I'm at lunchtime, and my mother calls, and she says that she saw in the paper, the local paper, that there's a clock in Salem that's not working. So that was terrible of her to do that. So then I called them up. The past pastor said, "Okay, we'll meet you down there." I got two of my colleagues, very distinguished horologists. We drove 3.5 hours down, and this man actually forgot that we were coming. And we're calling the phone number, and it's ringing on the inside of the church. So needless to say, they were not happy. The project was dead at that point. And I met Reverend Hill at a party about 4 years ago in Salem, a Christmas party. And I said, "Are you the one that stood us up?" And he said, "No," but he said, "I understand what you're saying." He said, "I'd like to revisit that." And I said, "Let's try and revisit it." So tonight and today has been about 4 years in the making, and actually 7 years in the making since the initial newspaper call.
That's exciting. That's nice. And welcome home to New Jersey from Pennsylvania. You're
New Jersey back up and back, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you going to be residing here permanently from this point forward?
Eventually, yes. I was doing a lot with the National Watch and Clock Museum for a number of years, and I just broke ties with them a couple months ago. And so it's more smooth sailing. So there's less apt to stay up there. Yes.
I do want to backtrack just a minute because I think that some people may not know what a horologist is. Can you give us a little background on the science and what your degree and your credentials are?
Well, we unfortunately, the issue we have with the National Watch and Clock Museum is too many people say that they are a clockmaker. A clockmaker is a clock fixer or a watch fixer. And they say, "Oh, I apprenticed under the old German down the street when I was a kid." So maybe the man is mechanically inclined, he has a degree in engineering, he's retired, whatever the case may be. These are people that are ill-trained to work on clock mechanisms, and they tend to do more bad than good. So 70% of what I do is undo bad restorations and bad repairs. Okay, then you go for the original fix to be done properly. So a clockmaker, in our terms, is a person who fixes a clock. A horologist is one that has the horological and preservation background. So he's basically a history, has some kind of degree in history of timepieces or decorative arts that adds to it. So it goes way beyond that because most of my colleagues are just clockmakers and they don't care where it came from, how it got here, anything about it. But I live in a very small circle of about 6 individuals in the entire country, and we consider ourselves antiquarian horologists. So preferably only dealing with objects and items from the 17th through 19th century, and between clocks, watches, and scientific instruments. We have no standards, unfortunately, even at the National Watch and Clock Museum. I was trying to implement them. It doesn't work. It's impossible. People don't want to be held to standards. We should have checklists just like a doctor is. We're a very specialty. We touch and honor pieces of history, and we should be, number one, we should be degreed, and number two, we should pass tests to do this. In England, the British take this very seriously. So I wasn't happy with the type of education I got at the NAWCC, which is a very small school, which I actually voted to close back in 2010 because we didn't have enough students. So I've been a teacher out there for 10, 12 years, teaching clock courses and decorative art courses. We cannot get 3 students for the year program. It's shocking. So horology is a very dead issue. But the British take horology to the nth degree. At any given night in England, there could be up to 10 horological colloquies, meetings. Let's gather at the local pub and talk about an issue, why this clock, why this watch is not working, deteriorating. They take it so seriously. Here we have maybe 10 regional or national meetings, and it's not for the sake of learning stuff. It's to sell stuff on the table and make money. So it's a big difference. There's a love there. Okay, so the British in the world of clocks and watches are the ultimate. The French, on the other hand, the French are the ultimate in restoration and conservation of furniture and wood objects. So they take it to a degree the British don't. So depending on what country. I lived a time in Venice for 6 months, and the Venetians take gilding using gold foil over objects such as frames to a degree that no one else does. So how this stuff got started in these countries, but I tried to pick and choose where I went. But a horologist is someone you want to work on a historic or antique timepiece. If the piece is 10, 20, 30 years old, take it to the local clock repairman. He'll do you well. And I want the challenge. I want to touch the piece that somebody made by hand in 1701 or 1750. And I want to think that I'm carrying on their legacy. And a lot of the horologists, or a lot of the clockmakers that made clocks in England, you can find them. They're highly revered. Some of them, there's up to 10 buried in Westminster Abbey. They were the scientists, the astronomers of the day, so they were highly regarded. We would not have the medical advancements today if it wasn't for the astronomers and clockmakers of years past. It has nothing to do with me, but they were cutting edge at that point.
I was just so fascinated by what you said. I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. In the video, you said that you were looking for one person to take over the responsibilities once the restoration is complete. How do you plan on finding that person, and what characteristics do you hope that they possess? Maybe it's one of our viewers out there tonight, you just never know. So what is it that you're looking for someone, what characteristics and what qualities are you looking for in someone to fill that position?
Well, I think I'd have to defer to the Reverend Hill for that, because it's under his auspices, the dwelling, and this person's going to have to go into the church whenever they need to, so he has to be comfortable with them, number one. I was hoping to have a younger person in the church, maybe has a little bit of dexterous skills, and